Whoa, what a mess. What on earth do we have going on here? What are you doing? You've got a mess around here.
I'm installing a galvanic isolator in the boat. And so I have the main power cut off and just took apart the breaker panel to get to the ground wire. Gonna connect the new ground wire to the incoming from shore power, run it down into the galvanic isolator, and then back up into the breaker box and plug it into the breaker. So that'll get rid of any DC current that we're getting from the shore power, because I read that a lot of boats have these installed, and sometimes the shore power, if the DC is grounding out, it'll travel down the shore power line, and so you'll get it in on your ground wire, and it can cause all kinds of problems with your boat. So just got it mounted down there, putting the wires together now, and probably another hour should be done.
Just in time for the heat wave, so we can get the electricity going back on the boat, so we can turn the AC back on, maybe?
Maybe so.
That'd be nice.
All right, back at it. So we got our AIS 700 back yesterday. I'm gonna put it in this morning. AIS is automated identification system for ships. Every ship that has one of these broadcasts out a unique code that lets other ships know the course, heading, speed, and they can, with a chart plotter, can tell you how close you're going to intercept that vessel. So these are really handy, especially when visibility is limited. And so we're going to get this installed and see if it's programmed correctly. Okay, so I just took the AIS back up and I'm not getting any power. Well, back when the ship was sinking, we isolated it to one breaker, and that breaker we thought was the underwater lights that was causing the issue of the short. It seems to be, it could be the AIS or the radio system. So we're going to disconnect the ground back downstairs and then put the old breaker back in and see if this powers up. If so, then we got to narrow it down to where the radio is having a ground fault, not the underwater lights.
It's nice to see it dry. The last time I was filming this area, it wasn't so dry. Now, where does that wire go?
This wire?
Mm-hmm.
That's our ground wire that goes up to the mast grounding system. So that's where we were getting the short, and on the outside of the bolt is where the zinc is that shorted out or blew out. So just gonna disconnect that and put the breaker back in and see if the radio starts up, the AIS. Little 12 volt breaker. It has a reset and pop on it. So if it triggers, it pops out, and it goes in here in this panel, and our electrical. Now it's plugged in. See if we're getting some power over here. No power yet, so got some more troubleshooting to do. So I'm not getting power to any of the devices up here, come to find out, so trying to figure out where it's broke at. I think I found the short. The radio is causing the short, I think.
The AM FM radio, or
Yeah, the AM FM radio that we installed down in when we first got up here. I think I got one of the wires wired backwards, so I'm not getting any ground voltage now over there. So still don't have any power to any of the devices up here. Without power on these two wires, so I may just run the wires over that way. Just resource it. So yeah, do some wire out and try that. Radio check, 7-1, 7-1. I think we got it.
so what was the problem?
So the power running into it, there's two wires here that are inbound power. They're just not getting power for some reason. I don't know why that is, but I'm just going to tape them up. I rerouted power from our radio over to it, the CD radio, and so now everything is up and running. The radio, the USB outlet, and the AIS that we just installed, I'm getting a green light on that. So just going to put it all back together. Probably look at the radio. I got a little bit of time left this afternoon to see if I can get that back together. And the other thing I noticed is the ground fault has gone away. So I think when I installed this radio, I might have wired something to ground. So going to check that out and see if we can get that working as well as everything else now.
So what about that breaker you put back in? Does that breaker tie into this, or have you tried pulling that breaker out?
Well, when I disconnected, I think the breaker was associated with this radio, which we weren't really using, the stereo system on the boat. And when I put it back in, with this all disconnected, I'm not getting the ground fault anymore. So I think the radio is causing the ground fault that blew up the zincs and almost sunk the boat.
So it wasn't the underground light, which we know on port side doesn't work per the
Right.
survey. So you
Yep.
think it's the radio that was the culprit all along?
I think quite possibly.
Huh.
There's a couple of lines that I had wired together here. I'm going to look at the book to see. It was just kind of weird that these two would be wired together, because there's a black wire for power, a red wire for power, and there's a yellow one that's fused, which is probably ground, and I had that wired to positive. So we'll probably just fast forward through all this part where I'm talking gibberish.
All right, everybody, it's my witness. He said he's the one that installed the radio and thinks that he sunk our boat.
Oops. Oopsie.
Learning curve. Okay, let's get down here and check on Patrick. He is checking on the ground wiring.
Yeah, so the ground wire to the zinc where we had the hole in the boat was carrying current on it, so I ended up pulling a breaker out of the DC power panel, and that fixed the issue. Well, I put the breaker back in because we're working on the AIS, and apparently that breaker does the AIS. So just going to see if there's current. If there is current on this, then I'm missing something. It's not making sense. But otherwise, it's probably the radio that was causing the problem, because everything is back the way it was except the radio has been disconnected, the stereo system for the boat. So yeah, I'm getting less than a half a volt, which is perfect. That means we're not sending 12 volts out the zinc. So that problem is narrowed down even further to be the stereo system. So we'll look at that next. But I think we're going to put this back together, put the floors back in, and move on to the next thing. So I'm rewiring in the stereo system. I got it powered up. I had to take the power to get the AIS from these lines that wasn't working. So I had power that was going to the radio, so I ran them down to a bus bar down below in there. And now I'm wiring back together the speakers for the radio right now. I'm just doing a little bit of heat shrink on the connectors and putting them back together, and then we'll try it out. Okay, the radio's off. Can you check the voltage one more time? 0.4, which is less than a half a volt going through, which is normal. So I think we found the problem with the voltage being the radio. It had some bad wiring from an amateur electrician at some point.
We won't say who.
All right, so all back together.
Wow. So bad wiring on a radio is what you say has caused our zinc to go bad and us to take on water, right?
Yes. So after a really long weekend, we have everything up and running. The radios, everything's put back together. Our radio's on, our USB power outlet's working, and our Bluetooth music radio players, the AM/FM radio's working. So rewiring it all, cleaning up the wiring that I initially did without the right connectors, putting the right connectors on and putting it back together, and then checking the electrical outputs down by the ground system, make sure that we weren't losing any voltage to the ground, and checking all that. And so job's finally wrapped up, and next thing it's on to the rest of the repairs from the flood, which all that remains down there now is the pumps for the bathrooms, and that's it. So we'll get to that next and call it a day.
Thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed our show. If so, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Subscribing is free and a great way to show us your support. Have comments for us? Please drop us a line. We love to receive feedback.